Hey everyone, Ethan Ader here with Hangar 9 and welcome to the third build video of the Hangar 9 CubCrafters XCub 60cc. So as you can see here in front of me, I have the left and right wing of the XCub 60cc, and that's what this video is going to be dedicated to. Basically everything in the assembly process that has to do with the wings. So everything from servo installation to assembling the wing itself to prepare it to mount to the airframe, as well as the lights and wiring on that. So without further ado, let's dive on into this video. The first servo that we are going to install into the wing is going to be the aileron servo. So as you can see here, we have the panel taped onto the wing itself. We're going to go ahead and remove this and install the servo to it. This string right here is going to be used in order to pull the servo wire through the entire wing. Fit the servo between the servo mounting tabs and the aileron servo tray as shown in the video. You can use a 2mm drill bit to mark and drill out the holes for the servo screws. With the servo screw locations drilled out in the aileron servo tray, you can now use the servo screws to install the aileron servo. Since we are running a gas setup on this airplane, we are going to use a little bit of thin CA to keep the servo screws secure in the panel. All you have to do is apply a couple of drops to the portion of each servo screw that is protruding through the other side of the tray. Using a toothpick or a hobby knife, you can puncture the covering in the servo panel for the servo cover mounting screws. Using a 24-inch servo extension for the aileron servo and also a safety clip, we can now route the aileron servo wire through the wing using the string. With the aileron servo wire routed through the wing, we can now secure the aileron servo panel to the wing using the 4 M2.5 by 10mm self-tapping screws. Now that the aileron servo is seated into the aileron itself, we can remove this ball link right here from the control arm, so then we can set up our linkage rod. In your bag of linkage rods, go ahead and locate the 6-inch linkage rod, and as you can see here, we have 2 ball links at the end. We're going to go ahead and screw these on to each end of the linkage rod. Make sure that you are threading the ball links evenly in order to achieve a 175mm long assembly. With the linkage rod assembled to roughly 175mm, we can go ahead and install it to the control arm and also the servo arm. For each side, you are going to want to use an M3 by 15mm screw, followed by a washer, and then going through one of the control arm sides, it's going to go through the ball link, and then on the other side, you are going to have a washer followed by the lock nut. The process for the servo arm is going to be very similar in the sense that you are going to use an M3 by 15mm screw, followed by a washer, then the ball link itself. Going through the servo arm on the other side, you have the washer followed by the lock nut. Now you can remove the flap servo panel from the wing. The installation of the flap servo to the flap panel is going to be very similar to the aileron servo to the aileron panel in the sense that it's going to mount up the same exact way as you see here. The only difference is that we are using the Dubro 5/8 of an inch servo arm as you see here, and also the servo is going to be facing in the wing as opposed to sticking out of the wing through a slot like on the aileron servo. The assembly process for the flap linkages are going to be the exact same as the linkages for the aileron, except you are going to use the 5.5-inch rod for the flap, and whenever the ball links are on, you want 165mm in length for the assembly. When attaching the flap linkage to the flap servo arm, you're going to use an M3 by 12mm screw with an M3 washer. On the side with the lock nut, you do not need an M3 washer. The flap servo panel can be installed using the same method as the aileron servo panel. Ensure that the linkage passes through the given slot on the top side of the leading edge of the wing. And just like securing the aileron servo panel, you are going to use the 4 M2.5 by 10mm self-tapping screws to secure the flap servo panel. Using an M3 by 15mm screw, attach the flap linkage to the flap control arm using the same method as the aileron linkage to the aileron control arm. You may find it necessary to trim the slot for the flap servo control rod in order for the hardware to pass through freely. Next, we can install the wing light, so go ahead and locate the wing light. It's going to look just like this. As you can see, we have plenty of wire lead in order to get it through the entire wing. And you can see on the back that we have some adhesive tape. Just like for the aileron servo wire, there is a piece of string that is pre-installed in the wing that you can use to tie to the wire for the light and route it through the wing. And peeling away the adhesive covering, you can now install the wing light into its given location. You can now attach two strut fittings to the bottom of the wing in their appropriate locations. One is going to be near the aileron and the other is going to be near the leading edge of the wing. You are going to use two M3x15 socket head cap screws for each strut fitting and ensure that each screw has a drop of Loctite on it. Next, you can thread the jury strut mounts into the holes of the wing like so. Make sure that the base of the mount is flush with the bottom of the wing as you can see here, and ensure that you place a drop of canopy glue on the screws before installation. This will essentially keep the mounts from vibrating loose. You can now repeat the entire assembly process up to this point for the other wing. For the next steps, we need to mount the wings to the fuselage. So as you can see here, just slide the wing tube into place on the fuselage. Then you can attach the wing with the nylon bolts. Note that you can cut the nylon wing bolts down to 1 3/8 inches in order to make installing the wing even easier. When the wings have been installed to the fuselage, you can rotate the model upside down. Since I am working on the airplane's left wing, we are going to install the left wing struts. Using an M3x15 socket head cap screw and an M3 washer for each strut, you can attach both struts to the fuselage. You do not need to apply Loctite to these screws, but it is advised that whenever you go flying, you should install a couple drops of canopy glue for each screw so then they do not vibrate loose in flight. It is good to note that there is a front and rear strut for each wing, and if you do not have the front strut in the front and the rear strut in the rear, then the struts will not line up correctly and will not mount properly. Also, there is a leading and trailing edge for each strut. The leading edge is going to be the wider side and the trailing edge is going to be the thinner or sharper side. With the wing struts attached to the fuselage side, you can now slide on these two jury strut pieces. Note that there is a leading and trailing edge for these fittings, just like on the strut. You can now thread the strut end fitting onto the threaded rod at the end of the strut. You can adjust the length at the end so there is no stress on the strut when it is attached to the fitting. You are going to use an M3x15 socket head cap screw, two M3 washers, and an M3 lock nut. You can now repeat this assembly process for the other main strut. Next up, we are going to assemble the jury struts. So as you see, we have the parts for one side of the wing right here. Keep in mind that there is no top and bottom, but there is a leading edge and trailing edge here. The sharper point is going to be the trailing edge. The more elongated curve is going to be the leading edge. You can attach one of the jury struts and the spreader bar to the fitting on the main strut using an M3x15 socket head cap screw, two M3 washers, and an M3 lock nut. On the other side of the jury strut that you attach to the spreader bar during this assembly, you can secure the jury strut over the jury strut fitting on the bottom of the wing using the keeper and also an included body pin. You may need to use a pair of pliers in order to squeeze the jury strut so then the body pin goes into the keeper smoothly. You can now repeat this assembly process with the other half of the jury strut on the opposite side of the spreader bar. After repeating the wing strut and jury strut assembly process for the other wing, you have now successfully completed the wing assembly and installation on the Hangar XCub 60cc. Up next, we are going to be installing all the components of the tail, such as the rudder and elevator, and also hooking them up to their appropriate servos.